For you, madame.
Hello, thank you for joining me today. I'm Jeanette Bussard, owner of Sewciety Boutique, a quilting and sewing studio in Bluffton, South Carolina. This is part 3 of my 4-part series on how to create beautiful binding completely by machine. In this part, we will learn how to finish the binding ends. In parts 1 and 2, we learned how to make the binding, how to attach the binding, and how to create mitered corners. But now we have those ends to finish. So we will create a perfect mitered seam without any puckers or gaps to deal with. So without any further delay, please join me at my cutting table and we will begin. All right, let's get started finishing these binding ends. For this process, you will need a few tools. I'm using my binding miter tool. I'm using a few straight pins, some fabric scissors, and a marking tool. This is a friction pen. It's up to you what kind of marking pen you would like to use, but that's the type I like. To start, I open the binding on the left-hand side. I am a creature of habit, so I always start with the same side each time. I open it up, and I want it aligned with the bottom of the quilt. And I take my binding miter tool, and I lay it down along the bottom of the binding so that the bottom is lined up here. And I want it halfway between the gap that we created when we sewed the binding on. So I'm going to take my marking pen and I'm just going to draw a line. Like so. So now I'm ready to cut that fabric off. So I cut right on that line. Now we're ready for the other side. I'm going to cut this off just to get it out of my way because I have way more binding than I need. But I'm just going to cut it off. And again, I'm going to open this side up. And just to keep it in place, keep it aligned, I use a straight pin. And I just pin it on this one end. So I open this up. And then I lay this left-hand side back down. And I have it all laying nice and smoothly. Open that back up. And now I can see where the two binding ends meet. So I'm going to take my binding tool and I'm going to lay it right where that cut edge is on the left-hand side of the binding. I want to make sure that's lined up correctly. I'm going to take that away, and then I'm going to draw a line, where that edge was. All right, now we need to add seam allowance. So this is where line number 2 comes in on your binding miter tool. I'm going to lay line number 2 on that line that I just drew. And then I'm going to draw another line, like so. Now if you've laid your binding out the same direction I have, you are adding that line to the left of your first line because you want to add you want to add length to the strip. You don't want to take it away. Okay, so once I've done that, I can take that pin out and I can cut that off at that second line that we just drew. Okay. Now we can match these ends up just like this and pin them and sew them. Or like we did when we pieced our binding strips together, we can cut these dog ears off and they will line up easily, so we can just pin them together. We know exactly how to pin them. So for that, just kind of a review from the first video. I'm going to line it up so that this edge is along the bottom edge of this side of the binding, and I have line number 1 lined up with that cut edge. And I'm going to take my rotary cutter and cut off that dog ear. I'm going to do the other side as well. So I'm going to have it lined up like this, where line number 1 is lined up with that edge that we cut, and this is lined up with this bottom edge. I'm going to take my rotary cutter and just cut off this dog ear. Now with those dog ears cut off, we can just easily pin these together. And I am ready to take this to my sewing machine and sew a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. I'll go do that right now. Okay, I'm at my machine and I'm ready to sew this seam. I just want to make a comment here that this is the reason that we want this nice large gap when we sew our binding together. We want to leave this nice gap, and I mentioned this in the first video, but we need this nice gap so that it's easier to get this seam under your machine. If you're dealing with a real tight space because you didn't leave much gap, it's far more difficult. So that's really the reason for that. So this is my 1/4 inch foot. I'm just going to quickly sew across here and we'll be done. Now you'll notice that I am ignoring the line that we drew with the number 2 line on my binding miter tool. I want to sew a 1/4 inch seam. I'm ignoring that line right now because that is not at a 1/4 inch. So I'm going to continue sewing. And I'm ready to take this to my iron and press it open. I'm at my pressing station and I need to press my seam open. But first I want to talk about some tools that you may already have in your stash that may help you to accomplish this task. This is completely optional. You don't need to have these tools. You don't have to do it this way. But I like to make this seam sit independent of everything else so that I'm only pressing this seam and I'm not crushing my batting. I'm not changing the crease on my binding. I'm just pressing that seam alone. So some of the tools you may already have in your stash that you could use. This is a point presser. So you would put this underneath here and use that to press your seam open. This also has a clapper underneath, so you may also have just an individual clapper. You could use that as well. This is a pressing ham, and it would go underneath as well, just like that, and you press your seam open. This is a full-size sleeve board, and it would go under just like that. You'd press your seam open. You may have a seam stick. This is a wooden tool that is flat on one side that you put against your ironing board, and then the curved side goes against your seam, so that as you press, you are literally only pressing that seam. But the item that I prefer to use, that I have this little, it's very cute, but I have this little miniature sleeve board, and I like to use this one. It's like a tiny ironing board, and that's the tool that I normally use. So I'm just going to place it under there, make sure it's laying nice and flat, and I'm going to press it with just a little bit of steam, and that's all I need to do. So again, I have not crushed my batting, I haven't changed the crease in my binding, so we are ready to go. And I can already see that binding is going to fit perfectly on this quilt. So we are ready to sew the rest of the gap close. So I will go to my sewing machine and do that. All right, I'm at my sewing machine and I am ready to sew this gap closed. So I'm going to find where the stitching ended, where the gap started, I guess. And I'm going to start sewing just a little bit before that. I want my stitching to overlap a little bit. So I'm going to start there. This is a 1/4 inch foot again, so I'm sewing a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I'll just start sewing. Oh, wanted to mention, you can use clips if you like. If that makes you feel more comfortable, we can certainly use some clips. And let's get started. And this is where my gap finished, so I'm going to go just beyond that point. Again, I want to overlap the stitching, but not too far. And that is it. We are finished. Our binding is on and our ends are finished. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comments section and I will address those just as soon as I can. In the next video, we will learn how to press our binding up in preparation for wrapping it around to the front of the quilt. We'll do just a little bit of hand stitching on the miter corners to prepare those for top stitching. And then we will learn how to complete that top stitching and make it look professional and accurate. Thank you so much again, and I hope that you can join me for part number 4.